Violet Evergarden. This was a recommendation to me from a friend. I was skeptical because it's a Netflix original, but I decided to check it out anyways. I did not regret it. To me, it's a 10 out of 10. So this series follows the story of Violet Evergarden, a child that was orphaned and was raised to fight in war, reduced to a tool, an emotionless tool, unable to feel human emotions like love or sadness, sympathy, pity. And she's given to a major named Gilbert. And he falls in love with her and tries to convince her that she is more than a tool, she's a human being. And they have a tragic fight where they're involved in a war where they both get severely injured. And before the end of that fight, he tells her that he loves her. And being somebody that never properly learned human emotions, she was not able to comprehend that. She loved him back, but she didn't realize what the feeling was. And so there's a huge blast, and Gilbert's never found again. He's declared missing in action. And Violet herself loses both her arms from a gunshot wound to an explosion wound. She almost dies too. And she decides to go on a journey to figure out what love is because she wants to know what the major meant. The anime is a tragedy. It's just tragedy after tragedy. Sad things happen. That's the reality of life. And she delivers a lot of letters, makes a lot of letters. But the anime focuses on all the ones that were tragic. And not just that, there's the tragedy of the staff. This is Kyoto Animation. They were the ones that were attacked in that arson fire. A lot of people died. A lot of people who worked on this anime were killed in a fire. And so this anime is just it's so sad, the story behind the plot and the production itself. So I'll analyze it, and I hopefully we'll see if I end up crying or not, because this anime does make you cry. Especially when it's an episode on something you can relate to. That's when it hits you right at home. So, the first episode. But before I start, I do want to point out the one thing that people don't like about this anime. It's very slow paced. It's very dramatic. And it takes a long time for it. Basically, when they crafted this anime, all the episodes are cooked on low flame, but it builds and it builds and it builds. It hits the climax. The episode comes together and unfolds, and by the end of it, you get a complete package that is just satisfying. Sometimes bittersweet, sometimes tragic. Sometimes an episode gives you time to recover before it brings you down again in the next episode. So, Violet Evergarden, episode 1 out of 13. They give you the background that I explained about who Violet Evergarden is. There's not much known about her past besides that she's just a broken child, just selfishly used by men who are waging war. She does become a doll, which is a reference to her job where she types letters for people. And she kind of helps in her own way to make it a better letter, whether it's articulated better or whether it's more emotional. And she hopes that this job will help her understand what I love you means. In the second episode, due to her lack of emotion, she is unable to write effective emotional letters when she has clients with sensitive topics to talk about. She's also very blunt, honest, and a habitual critic. Customers complain, and her coworkers think she should quit. But one of them defends her and says, and she stays, the red-haired man found the brooch from the general. There's a whole story behind that brooch. And he gets drunk with the fan service woman. I don't remember her name. I just call her the fan service woman. And implies that he is dead, referring to him as he was. So they really put off the question as to the Gilbert is dead or not. It's implied he is. He might be. I still have the OVA to watch, which I also do a video on. So maybe he's not. Maybe he is. Don't know at this point. Third episode. In this episode, Violet gets a client who has an alcoholic brother who is wasting his life away with alcohol, temper tantrums, doesn't have any motivation in life. And Violet helps to write a letter that makes the brother cry and reflect upon his life and come to some kind of resolve to overcome his issues. And this is a letter that allows Violet to graduate from her school because the teacher is impressed with what she was able to accomplish with it. In episode 4, and here's where you get these episodes that they build, they cook slowly, but they deliver by the end. You just gotta. The episodes are like a roller coaster, and you know how a roller coaster starts off slow and it builds up, and you can't wait. You're just waiting with excitement, and then you get to the very, very top, and at the very end of the ride, the last couple of seconds, you rush down. That's how the episodes in this anime work. And episode 4 is like that. And I understand people are saying that, oh, the pacing is slow. It takes too long to get good. Well, these people need to be more patient. They're used to the quick action packed type pace. You gotta broaden your horizons. Anyhow, Iris, one of her coworkers, gets a request from her hometown. She doesn't recognize who it's from, but it's actually her mom, and she's trying to lure her daughter in. Unfortunately, she falls down the stairs while getting mad at Violet and messes up her arm. Unable to type, Violet has to go with her. Once there, her parents reveal the plan they really had, which was to get her to quit and settle down. Iris gets upset and refuses. This is an episode that really shows how far gone Violet's character is. Yeah, she's out of touch with human emotion during this time. She doesn't know how to keep a secret because she's too honest and doesn't recognize the importance of secrecy. And she's always by the book. Yeah, she is very, very by the book when it comes to anything, whether it's real life or not, or whatever her principles may be. She becomes disappointed when Iris tells her she doesn't understand her feelings yet. Since Violet keeps telling everyone things Iris doesn't want them to know. She tells Iris a boy there rejected her once, after she told him, "I love you." It reminded Violet of when the major told her that. Violet tells Iris this, and she fails to begin to understand where Violet is coming from. Yeah, so Iris needs to understand that Violet is a broken person. It's not her fault. Violet then writes a letter by Iris, where Iris is apologizing to everyone after the outburst at a party. This includes the boy from before who attended. He wasn't supposed to, since Iris told Violet not to include him in the invitations, but her parents had set up that he should be. But Violet did so anyways, after confirming with the mom, which she was not supposed to do. And that's because, despite that Iris wanted to manipulate the party, Violet's a client hired who got hired to do this job, and so Iris has no power. Iris goes by what her parents says. So this led to where Iris yells at her mom. In the scene afterward, they talk about love, which results in the letter being written. The letter is a success. Iris and her parents resolve the conflict, and Iris tells Violet it was a good letter. Violet gets surprised and feels good about it. Episode 5. So Violet is sent to make a love letter for a 14-year-old queen who is being forced into marriage with a 24-year-old she doesn't love. She gets annoyed at Violet's drone-like character and tells her to cheer up. Violet uses her hands to make herself smile. she, it's always funny when she does that. Next scene. The princess shows frustration, and her caretaker since birth tells her once she gets married, she'll have to stay behind. She seems fine with it, but the princess cries, saying she wants her to stay with her. Violet clenches her hands, showing some emotion towards that. Later, the princess tells Violet her story about the man she is going to marry. At the time, she was 10, and all the men at her birthday party only looked at her as a marriage, since she had just reached the age where she could. One man doesn't, and talks to her truthfully. That's the man, but the princess is worried the feelings won't be mutual. Violet begins to understand more about feelings, in particular the princess, and decides to go do something not by the book, which shows progression in her emotions, and decided to have the two write each other letters written by the same person instead of the dolls. So the funny thing is, this novel this is novel or new to the town, and they start to really like these public exchanges through letters, like it's some kind of soap opera. That's when they're fighting back and forth through Violet's letters. Eventually, through brute honesty, especially on the part of the princess, Prince Damien agrees to meet her in the garden and proposes. Then they went for the bittersweet ending. Violet left before the marriage, which made the princess sad. Also, the princess and Alberta had to part ways despite the princess' protests. Alberta finally shows some kind of emotion and wishes her happiness. At the end, Violet is actually happy for the princess and smiles. In the early episodes of Violet Evergarden, you're just hunting to see any kind of progression in Violet's emotions, and she shows it bit by bit by bit as her character develops and grows and grows. And then confronted from a man from the wars, is saying how could a bloodthirsty killer end up writing letters to bring people together. Episode 6. In the beginning, Violet seems mad, and when someone points it out, she uses her hands to smile again. So, when she smiled in the last episode, I don't think she realized she smiled, because she does the whole fake smiling thing again. Violet tells Leon she understands the value of her work. Leon overhears men trying to come on to Violet. Apparently, Leon is an orphan also, and the man's prejudice against orphans makes Violet tell them not to bother trying to get at her. Leon then asks Violet out to watch the comet. I chuckled at how he was strangling the bread out of being nervous. He even tears it in half of the emotion. That poor piece of bread, a victim. Leon was a cool character. I hope that they bring him back, and if they do a second season, I hope Leon comes back. So Leon says love turns people into... Oh, what? So people celestial people... Oh, so Leon had lost his parents, and Leon's story leads to him asking Violet about herself. She says she has no blood relatives. Leon asks her if she feels lonely, and we get the drone-like response as usual that she doesn't understand emotions. In getting her to talk about the major, Leon teaches her the feeling of loneliness. And then Leon comes to a realization, but right before he could tell Violet that what she is feeling is love for the major, Violet interrupts as the comet is coming. Once Violet leaves, Leon realizes he wants to be a traveler like Violet, and tells her he hopes to run into her again. As Violet grows farther and farther, Leon cries and asks Violet if they could see the starry sky when they meet again. But it seems at this point she was too far to hear. Yeah, so Leon was great. I hope that we get to see more of Leon. And then Violet smiles again, but only for a while. 7. I like how they bring up the major without Violet there. Like to remind the viewer, yes, Violet is learning about emotions, but the major seems pretty dead at the moment. That was harsh. I don't know why I typed that. In her new doll assignment, she gets this alcoholic who wants to treat her like a maid. Violet eventually tries to learn how to cook, but doesn't even know how to crack an egg. Still, she manages to make something the alcoholic deemed alright for the first time. I like how you can tell how bad she cooked the spaghetti by how the whole thing goes up when the alcoholic forks it. While she types the author's story, she puts herself in the protagonist's place and begins to experience more emotions. Violet does start getting a bit carried away to the point her reactions to the story start making the author think. So he's typing out. She's helping this man write his novel, and she's like on the edge of her seat typing this out. Like, what's gonna happen next? And even tries to advise him. Unfortunately, Violet finds a parasol, of which she had no idea what it meant to the author, and it had belonged to the author's daughter. He gets mad at Violet, slaps the parasol out of her hands, and tells her to leave. It seems he lost his daughter somehow. Violet resists by saying the story won't be complete, but by this time, she is so absolved in it, she wants to also see it for herself, how it ends. Violet gets him to open up. They had lost their mom from an illness. He also loses his daughter at a young age from a disease that wasted her away. Yeah, it kind of seemed unfitting at the moment. Even I felt some feelings here because this man lost his he lost his mom and his daughter. So moving right along, it's almost like you feel the emotions the way Violet feels them. If the show can compel you to feel, it's a weird synchronization between the viewer and Violet between these emotions. So we see now he drinks because of the loss of his family. And then Violet cries. He decides to continue the story, and though the ending was bad for him, he decides to make it a happy ending for the audience. For the end of the story, the writer asks Violet to walk over the leaves with the parasol, as her daughter would say. Violet does it, not realizing the author was joking, but she tries and seems to do it. The author cries as he reminds her when her daughter said she'd promised him she'd show him someday. It seems she did, from the afterlife, and through Violet. He cries and wishes his daughter were still alive. What about the wife? He sees her daughter in front of him holding his hand and disappears as he was just imagining. Of course, Violet fell in the water, but she did manage probably 3 steps, according to her. He tells her, "I was sure there was no God, but if there is one, it must be you." He gives her the parasol because she fulfilled the promise his daughter had made to him. At the end, it's funny. She says thank you for using the doll service because the real service she provided wasn't her job. It was what she did out of her own heart, and she leaves. At night, she realizes that the people she killed in war weren't just enemies on the battlefield, but people who had hopes and dreams and loved ones they had made promises to. She cries. Now that she is back, she meets with the older woman she met earlier. She tells him about the Major being dead. So this is the big reveal. Finally, they decided to make her aware halfway through. So the reveal shows he possibly died in a bomb attack. However, they never found the body besides just a dog tag. So maybe he still could be alive. Not so bad after all. Violet, of course, is not convinced and believes he must still be alive somewhere. She cries and runs away. Overcome by emotion, she is becoming more and more human. Also, this reminds me a lot of Gene Shaft. So, there's an anime called Gene Shaft in 2001 that's very similar to Violet Evergarden. Or rather, Violet Evergarden is very similar to it. Oh wow. That's it for that. I guess I'll do one more round of the songs. It wouldn't hurt. So episode 8. Violet confronts the captain and shows the gross of emotions she's had by being outraged and sad in front of him about the Major. The captain appears surprised she's being emotional and says all she has been to the Major was a tool for war. And Violet ends up finding the Major's grave, but she's still not convinced entirely that he is dead. And she has it's a flashback where the Major wants to buy Violet a gift, and he asked her, "What do you want?" But she doesn't know what she wants. She's never been given a gift before. She's never been asked, "What do you want?" before. And so she doesn't know what to say. And she asks the Major, "What should I want?" And the Major tells her, or Gilbert tells her, that people like her tend to like dresses and accessories. And so she asks for that, which makes him smile because she's just so clueless. He does find a brooch, which Violet seems to be fascinated with. And the reason being is that it matches his eye color. And so that's what he ended up buying her. And then we get to see the fight, the actual war that happened where Gilbert supposedly died. And but before that, Violet showed concern and told Gilbert, if they both live, what will happen after the war? Because she wants to stay with him. Now during the fight, it's brutal. They're fighting soldiers and they both get ambushed and Gilbert gets shot in the head. Luckily he had a helmet, but he still takes a pretty heavy head wound. And he gets shot again, and Violet tries to save him, but in the process she gets shot in the arm by a gun. Her arm falls off, and there's a huge explosion, and they both get blown. She gets blown away by it partially, and her other arm falls off because she just took heavy damage. And the mayor tells her that she must live. And he starts crying because he thinks that he's pretty much dead at this point. And she starts crying too because she loves the Major, but she doesn't understand what love is. So she doesn't know what she's feeling. She's just crying. And that's when that's when Gilbert tells her that I love you. And she just doesn't know what it means. In episode 9, that's when they end the war, at least in the flashback. And Violet now is digging through the old rubble for the Major. But she doesn't find him and she gets pulled home. When she gets back home, she has like a mental breakdown. She even tries to choke herself. And she has a very disturbing dream of the Major talking to her where he's just bleeding uncontrollably. And in a twist, she gets a letter from her friends. And so she gets saved by a letter. So she's always been saving people with letters. And this time, she gets saved by a letter that is sent to her. And at the end, Violet tries to understand her emotions and find some resolve. It was nice to see the princess. So at the end of this episode, they show us the princess again, and the author, whose film now got adapted to a movie. So it's nice to see this to come full circle and show the people that she has helped and how they have progressed to live better lives. And episode 10, oh man, episode 10, that one hit me really hard. This is probably the saddest episode, only because I was in a similar situation, and I knew when I saw this is the longest episode. When I saw the beginning of it about the daughter and the sick mom, I already knew this was gonna be a bad one, or a rough one, you could say. She gets hired by a mom that wants to write some letters, and she's very sick. She's very ill, and the daughter sees this, and the mom tries to assure her that she's going to get better, but she's not. And Violet shows up, and they're writing the letters, and the mom tells Violet what the letters are for. Now, obviously, anybody that looks at it can understand what the letters are for. But the way they execute it and what it actually means is what surprised me. And the daughter is young. She's a little girl. She already lost her dad. And she gets jealous of Violet because she wants to spend... She knows her mom is dying and she wants to spend these last days with her mom. And her mom tries to tell her to understand that I need to write these letters. And the daughter tells her, like, why would you do this? Nobody visits you. Nobody cares about you. Who would you be writing letters for? And It's funny how she sees Violet as a doll, like literally a doll. I guess because the way she dresses and her, I guess the way she acts. And so she's writing the letters, and the mom is constantly getting worse. She's getting sick. She's almost falls, and the daughter starts to hate Violet because she feels that Violet is stealing these last days she can be with her mom. And Violet just tells her like, I have to do this. These letters are important to her, and so she completes the job. And by this time, Violet has kind of grown on the daughter, and she accepts her and gives her a kiss on the cheek. At the end of the episode, she spends the last few days with her mom, who is dying of her illness, and they show them doing activities throughout the house. And you see a scene where they're doing something, they disappear. Another scene where they're having a good time, then they disappear. And then the mom dies tragically from her illness. And the daughter is left alone, and she tries to make the best of it and continue her own life. And it turns out the letters, as everybody would have thought, are for her. But her instructions to Violet is she wrote letters for her to last up to 50 years. And every year for her birthday, she wrote a letter that's to be sent to her through her mom. So every year she gets a letter from her deceased mom saying, oh, hi, you're 18, or you're 19, or you're 20 now, you're 21. And talking about just the possibility of getting married, having kids. Yeah, this was a rough one. This was a very rough one. Very emotional. In episode 11, we have a soldier who is asking for a doll. And Violet is told that it's a battlefield. It'll be dangerous for her to be there. But Violet understands that these men have emotions and feelings and love that they want to communicate through their letters. And so she decides to put herself in this dangerous situation. And they fly her in there, and she goes down. But all the men have been killed and shot. But there's one that's still alive. I cannot put happy music to anything I say here. Let's change this really quick. Okay, so I don't think I need it anymore. I looped it twice. So anyhow, so these soldiers want to send letters to their loved ones. In particular, one that gets hired by Violet, but he gets shot in the abdomen, or he gets sniped. And when Violet gets there, they're about to finish him off, but Violet manages to come down and save them. Since she's great at combat, she scares the guys away. And she takes the injured soldier. They go into a little cabin, and she starts memorizing the letters that he wants to send. He sends a letter to his parents saying that he was thanking them for raising him, and that if they ever reincarnate and get married again, he'd want to be the son again. And then he talks about Maria, who is the childhood friend that they both fell in love with. But before they can act like a real couple, he had to get sent to war, and so it never happened. And he died, but at least he managed to get the letters down. And at the end, Violet goes to deliver them, and the parents and the daughter break down crying. And Violet starts crying herself, and it's tragic. War is a horrible thing, and the soldiers oftentimes don't even know what they're fighting about. And at the end, they show Violet thinking, I don't want anybody else to die. In episode 12 is the one with the train, where Gilbert's brother is shown to still just hate Violet and kept calling her a tool. Her friends are in the same train also, two of them, and are in danger. She had seen them and went to protect them. Violet decides not kill, which was a horrible decision and makes no sense. She tells the brother that Gilbert told her to live, not to kill, but it means for her to live specifically. You have to kill in a war. Trying to win by not doing that is to be out of touch with reality. And the train that they're on gets invaded by I guess what they call the anti-peace enemies. And Violet ends up getting into a fight with them, but because she doesn't want to kill, she almost gets killed herself until Gilbert's brother saves her. And There's a point where they're about to get shot, and Violet Black blocks the shots with her arms. In the beginning of episode 13, her arms get one of her arms gets shot off, and then the brother ends up saving the pendant because one of the guys had taken Violet's pendant that has the same color as Gilbert's eyes. And it turns out that they put a bomb on the train, and one of Violet's friends does this very, very risky kick to knock one of the bombs off. And Violet herself tries to pull one of the bombs off, but the lever she's pulling is hard to pull, and her arm like explodes. Her arm, her hand, like mechanical hand, like falls apart. But she manages to do it, and the bomb blows up between falling off the bridge and landing in the water. And then there's a flashback where the Major is telling Violet that she's not a tool, and he wants to tell her that he has feelings for her, but he doesn't tell her. So then Gilbert takes Violet to go meet the Major's mom, and this is just for Violet to just come to terms that he is probably dead. And the mom wants to meet her because that Violet was somebody very special to Gilbert, and they get to meet, they get to talk. She shows her the brooch, and so Gilbert tells Violet to live a long life and to die after that, and he says that that's his final order. But Violet tells him that she no longer needs orders, which surprises him. So then she meets with her old friend from her job, and they all read letters from each other. One of them gets embarrassed because his letters was to like a future daughter, and he felt a lot of embarrassment. And when the letters are falling from the sky, there's this rare occurrence that happens in anime every now and then, where the music, the animation, the voices, and the story perfectly blend together in a wonderfully artistic way. And that's what happens at the end of the Violet Evergarden TV series. And Violet ends up writing a letter to the Major, where she's able to finally express her feelings emotionally the way that it should be. And she finally understands what the Major said about "I love you" when she cries. It's tragic because she didn't have to do this. Violet didn't have to suffer like this, but she wanted to know. She wanted to search for the truth and an understanding of feeling, and it wasn't a beautiful thing. Because to an extent, because it brought her a lot of pain and emotional suffering. But it's better to learn the truth than just to live, than further just stay an emotionless person. And at the end, Violet has now appears to be fully human again, constantly smiling, and she continues her job. Yeah, so Violet Evergarden is just basically character development, the anime, and there was so many sad parts. It's a tearjerker. You're gonna cry if you learn how to really appreciate and analyze and soak in what the anime is trying to portray to you and express to you. You'll cry, and it's just a tragedy. I'm gonna watch the OVA next. That'll be a separate video, and I'm really excited to see what happens next. But anyway, that's my thoughts on Violet Evergarden, the TV series. 10 out of 10 masterpiece, but it's not for impatient people. And the music is beautiful. It's beautiful music. I really love the music in this anime. It fits the themes well, extremely well.